Hello, everybody, and welcome to my 2025 Summer Lunch and Learn series. And I'm Helen Panos, Dynamis Learning, K through 12 tutoring, SAT, ACT prep company. And we do executive functioning now as well. We do advocacy, helping parents advocate for their kids through the school system. But today, and in the first four of my Lunch and Learn series, we're going to be talking about executive functioning. If you had joined us during the spring, you probably recognize Crystal. And I just realized, Crystal, that our names are not on here. It looks like StreamYard changed some things around.
Uh-oh.
Our names disappeared.
Great. Okay.
So welcome to the first Lunch and Learn series. How you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good. How are you, Miss Helen?
Good, doing good. So today, guys, we're going to be talking about the power of self-monitoring and helping students learn from the past. And we have a free gift offer for you. We felt like this was a good topic to begin with because, school's wrapping up here this week, actually. And, it's a good time to kind of self-reflect, look back, self-monitor. So we have four great topics coming up for the next four consecutive Wednesdays. Well, today is the first, and then all the way till middle of June. And Crystal will be joining us to talk about these different topics. You will see a graphic every week on my page, on my Dynamis page, that tells you the topic coming up. And here's the one for next week. You might want to hang out for this one. Why maintaining a consistent summer schedule is important. Wow, that's big for parents, right? So, Crystal, why don't we begin with you introducing yourself to our watchers, our listeners?
All right. Well, my name is Crystal Dement. I am an executive function coach. I have been an executive function coach officially for about 4 years now. And before that, I worked in business management in HR, helping people with their executive functions, as well as my own experience of growing up with my executive dysfunction and ADHD. And so I've been there and I know what to do. I figured it out. So here I am.
Been there, done that, huh?
Mm-hmm. Still
So anything else you want to add? Or I know we've been busy, right, with executive
yes.
functioning, even for the summer, folks. Some people may think you can't do it over the summer, but yes, you can. Isn't that right, Crystal?
That's right. Over the summer is a really good time to work on personal development. It's also a really good time to reflect on the school year and, talk about what worked and what didn't work, and then prepare mentally for what is coming. Especially if you're jumping from 8th grade to high school or from high school to college. Those are two different areas where we're going to find a lot of executive dysfunction. And so,
must be why we have a couple eighth graders, huh?
yeah, that's right.
Yeah, big jump, and parents realize that. So let's start off by me asking you: Could you start by just defining what self-monitoring is in the context of K through 12 students? And I know we do executive functioning more for 6 through 12. But how would you define self-monitoring for parents?
So self-monitoring it's essentially a student's ability to be an active observer of their own learning, behavior, and thinking. And so it's kind of like managing yourself and reflecting on what you're doing. A lot of times there is a rush that's going, we want to rush through something so that we can get to the interesting stuff. And so we tend to forget to ask myself, how am I affecting others right now? Or did I pack my lunch? Did I finish my homework? Am I learning the right material is a good one. It even goes down to, am I drinking water and am I eating? And so, the whole day can go by without a single thought in this direction. And so it's important that we learn these skills.
It's really amazing. If you think about it, it's sometimes hard to remember to drink water and eat lunch or whatever if you're really busy.
Mm-hmm. That's right. And for a very busy brain that's just naturally very busy, you're going to miss a couple of those things here and there. And so it's important to learn to stop and take, and observe what's going on with you and your surroundings, and, pick up.
We need to teach that to kids. We can't assume they know what to do with that, right?
Right.
To even do that.
Right. And it comes naturally to some people. Some people are very good at it, but a lot of people, especially those with, on the spectrum and with ADHD, they have to learn it. And
Mm-hmm.
so supporting that as an adult, especially for the younger ones, you have to function for them in that way already. And then, for the older students, if they do have issues with executive dysfunction, they're going to continue with that. And you still have to try to help them to develop that. And so also, of course, coaching is what that's part of what we do, is helping to establish those types of things.
Mm-hmm. And in terms of staying focused on task and keeping track of belongings for kids, what are one or two simple, actionable strategies that we can give parents today that they can start using even today or tonight to help their child develop better self-monitoring skills?
Awesome. Okay, so great question.
Yes, I like that question.
Yes. So there's one thing that I do myself, and I always have. I picked this up working as an operations manager in a restaurant. So I was walking around everywhere, and I had a notepad with me. Okay, and I call it the distraction parking lot. Okay, it's like everything and every thought, even if it's something that is important, goes into one list. And so it's kind of a brain dump that we can do in that moment to keep focused on what we're doing. And so any topics, ideas, worries, things that we anticipate would distract us from doing what we need to do, that would derail us, you put it on a piece of paper. Now, I use these Stenograph notebooks these days because they're small. They have a line right down the middle. And so I'm able to brain dump on one side, and then I can go over and categorize or do whatever I need to do. If I need to create a new list off of it, you can number them. You can say, how long is this one going to take? And so that you can help to build also those time management skills using something like this.
That's cool.
Mm-hmm.
That's a great idea. Yeah. I like that. Do you want to give another strategy?
Sure. Yeah. So another good one would be a launch pad. Okay. So in a launch pad in my home specifically looks like a piece of furniture that's by the front door, has the calendar, and it has spaces that are labeled. This is important if you want consistency, for backpacks. The agenda goes in one spot that comes home from my children so that I can sign that. There's a place where, when paperwork comes home, we have folders there. Some of it is for, assignments they had and not. So you have your, like a purse there, keys, everything that goes in that spot. Like, this is where I stop before I move on to the next thing or before I leave the house. And in that spot, that's where you can do that self-monitor, is like, okay, do I have everything I need? Did we do the homework? Did we? And you walk past it every day too. So it reminds you to stop and think about what's going on. And so that is another really good way to do that at home.
So if they have sports, for instance, and maybe their cleats, if they're playing football, let's say, are there, or anything they have to take, maybe there's a bag of stuff, right, that they have to take to soccer practice or to, I know this is probably a big deal, is people remembering to pack up, let's say they're swimming, the kids are swimming. Do you have your towel? Do you have if you're outside, sunscreen? Do you, because some of the meets are outside. I sponsored a team that was outside pool the whole time last year. A lot of them are indoors, but there's several that are still outdoors too. So sunscreen, a towel, maybe flip-flops. Is it good to do a checklist? And maybe where would that checklist go? Would that go on the launch pad too? Or is that in their room? And then they leave the bag, they pack it. Maybe they have to pack it from their, bedroom where the closet is. And then they go and have to leave it at the launch pad.
Yeah. And so you could have a checklist there, one of these pads there to sit and be like, okay, what is it that I need to do right now before I leave? Or what is it that I need to do tomorrow before I leave? And have that area to put everything in. Because a lot of times, what will happen is you'll have a bag that gets packed and it's placed in a different spot every time. And just that little bit of inconsistency makes it so the brain is scattered more. So just bringing that into one place where they can touch and go is going to help with that. So it reminds me, hey, I need to stop and think about this right now. And it's there, it's tangible, it's in the way, it's hard to avoid. And so getting in the habit of doing that, of course, takes a little bit of parent guidance. But when that does become a habit, it remains a habit lifelong.
Is it still true that it takes 21 days to form a habit?
It does, sometimes faster, sometimes longer, but essentially what we try to do is 21 days. 21 days of doing something, and then see where you're at with it.
And I'm thinking about vacations right now and how important executive functioning actually is to vacations, right? Yes. And if you're going overseas, wow. I mean, I even get like kind of overwhelmed, like, oh, this is so different in packing, really. And I'm hearing a lot of parents are going overseas. And I have to put in a plug for Destiny. We both know my assistant, Destiny, and she's got a baby, right? And a 7-year-old. And this is the first trip really for both the kids, of course, the 1-year-old for sure. And so her and her husband sat down and planned out on Sunday, because I got to go to San Francisco and then they're going to Yosemite, how, we're doing it well in advance because I got the kids. And then what about their snacks and all this stuff? And, teaching the little boy who's kind of getting old enough to kind of know how to do this, but planning out where they would go in San Francisco, because they only have maybe a couple days total before they pick up a car and drive, right? So, you have to, that's quite a trip actually to plan, because you got to think about young kids on a plane. Then you got to think about, how do you get to your hotel? And then what are you going to do? And then the weather, because I wondered the weather is actually colder than you would think in the San Francisco Bay Area. Right. Even in June. I got surprised my first time out there. So, and she looked at that, and then I said, okay, then you got to worry about safety, right? In this day and time with kids. And so we talked about some places I knew of, and I suggested, well, I know somebody that works in San Francisco. Do you need to speak to them? Or do you, all this stuff? Because a lot of people do ask on Facebook, hey, I'm going here. What are your recommendations about restaurants or whatever? So, and then it has to be kid-friendly stuff for them, not, they are going to, I think, her husband's interested in technology and stuff like that. So they're going to go over to Silicon Valley one day.
Cool.
But it's interesting to hear all they're doing is going for 6 days, but look at all of what they'd have to do.
Right. And so the issue often arises of what is it? How do I even start planning something like that? And of course we are using it more and more, but the accessibility tool, which is AI, helps out a lot with that. So going into AI and typing or somebody, if you don't want to admit that it's you, but is going on a trip to San Francisco and has these children that are these,
and they did. She used ChatGPT. He uses Grok, I think. So they kind of were like using their own one that they use, that they like the best, that they prefer. She told me, I asked her if she used ChatGPT, and she said yes. I thought that was cool. Yeah, I used it too on a trip for December to see what it would do. Because at first I was looking for what's a midpoint from Atlanta to Dayton. Then it told me. I said, is there any other city? They told me. Then I said, well, is there a hotel that's in a safe neighborhood that's close to the interstate? Like, you got to be pretty specific with it, right?
Right.
Glad you brought up AI. And then, and so it gave me, it said what the cities were, specifically neighborhoods, and then what the exit numbers were. And then I said, are there hotels that would allow a dog for one night? That's all we're doing is just staying over one night, possibly. Which we didn't end up doing any of this, but it was interesting to test it out that way. And then it told me the names of the hotels, but then I don't know if it would give ratings on AI. So I went on, Google and looked at those specific hotels.
Right.
So I don't know if it does ratings or not, or reviews.
I'm not sure. I actually have never tried to do that, so I don't know, but it's something to look at.
Yeah, it was great because I think it's faster than trying to Google that.
Yeah.
Trying to figure it out.
And you could ask it, what is it that I need to know? Or how should I plan this? for our situation.
Mm-hmm.
And it can throw out, you can start the conversation right there, and it'll throw out like, well, you need a plan. You need to make sure you pack this, this, and this, and this. You need to make sure that you have a separate bag for this, this, and this. And so that's, it's been very helpful for a lot of people in that way. It's just,
and I would think
all
if
about
you're flying overseas, then you could ask it about requirements through the airport as well.
Right. Exactly. So what is it that I need to think about before I leave? It's like, well, do you have everything for flying overseas? Do you have your passport? It might even go there.
Now that you say that, speaking of planning way ahead, right? If you're planning an overseas trip, sometimes you do it 6 months in advance, right? So you could ask it, leading up to 4 months leading up to my trip to whatever, Greece, then what do I need to know in different segments? 4 months out, 3 months out, 2 months out.
Exactly.
Isn't that crazy? It's almost like perfect. I think I would plan a wedding that way now.
Yeah. Yeah. This to me, as an executive function coach, AI is an accessibility tool. It's an accessibility tool because it helps to fill in that gray area of, I don't know what to do right now, or like what order to do something in. And I'm poor at time management skills and planning. And so here's a thing that helps with all of that. And so definitely utilize that, like, what is it, for instance, if you're talking about children, like, okay, I signed my child up for soccer. What do I need? If I'm leaving the house, what do I need? And it's going to give you a list of things and things to think about. It usually goes off.
Yeah. I see parents asking that on certain Facebook pages. Oh, I just did this, and I'm not done this before. Or I know some of you guys probably know how to do this. And then they send out like a big Facebook page where they're going to get about 50 comments.
Right. Yeah.
It may not be so good for executive functioning. And then you're in your mind reading all those comments. And then you're trying to decipher. And now it gets more complicated because you're trying to decipher between all these comments, right?
Right. And then there's opinions in there and all kinds of things when, you can pull from more.
That would be another interesting thing we should talk about sometime, is how to, when you're asking people for recommendations, how do you evaluate and just get rid of certain things? I assume people would know how to do that, but maybe not.
Well, you'd be surprised at the amount of people that don't know how to find relevant information. Like they can't tell the difference between what's in a fact and what's an opinion. And so that causes a lot of issues. And I think that definitely is something that people need to learn.
And if people, even when people are commenting back to you, you do have to decipher, is this a fact? Because, and I'll say, I know this because blah, blah, blah. This happened to me or my husband, or that implies a fact. But if people are just saying stuff, then you should probably assume it's their opinion.
Yeah.
They liked,
or from their one experience that they had.
Right. Yeah. Oh, I went to Nashville. Oh, I like to know where you went to Nashville, or what restaurants did you like? That's my favorite. Which restaurants did you like?
That actually ties right back into self-monitor too, because if we're sitting here like, okay, I want to make sure, you stop and you think about it for a second. Is that a fact that I can count on? And then go research something that somebody says to be sure, because if it's just, a one-off and it rained the one time the person went there, and they're like, well, you got to make sure that you bring an umbrella and this and that because it rained one time.
And if it was 10 years ago, how do you know the restaurant's still open? Let's take Maui, for instance, right?
Yeah.
Lahana, a lot of those restaurants are not there anymore.
Right.
So anybody that went, even 10 years ago, probably couldn't tell you where to go now. Right. I mean, it's that simple. And menus change. So anytime I ask like that and the people give me restaurants, I would probably then just go to Google, look up that restaurant and look at their menu and see if I personally like that. Because my type of eating is different from others.
Right.
Even my own husband.
Yeah. And so that is something that does take time to develop, with executive dysfunction, is figuring out what's relevant and what's not. So there you go.
Yeah. Interesting. Basic stuff, right?
Yep. Basic stuff.
Things we would assume everybody knows, but not necessarily.
Right. And that's the sad thing about executive dysfunction is it's stuff that a lot of people assume you just should be able to do or should be able to know, when it actually is just something that they need to be taught. You know?
And that's why I was always wondering, like, how, like, somebody asked me, I taught her how to use the Chat GPT this weekend, and we're on a female nonprofit organization. We're on the board. And I said, well, she goes, I've kind of got a rough draft for the year. I said, well, have you thought about using AI to do that? And so I said, let's do it. And so I did it, and I was amazed at what it came up with. I was like, wow, look at this. And, you know, even as simple as if you'd like to attract 30 to 50-year-old women to the organization, what kind of events would you do? And what themes would you do? I was it was amazing to see. Like, some of those ideas I can't even come up with, and I'm pretty creative, but I was like, wow.
And to say it to our audience, you do have to fact check things that come up on AI. You know, because the way that it's designed, it's designed to predict the next word in the sentence. You know, and that's really what it's designed to do based upon what it knows from a set amount of information. And so it can give you like ghost recommendations for things that just aren't real, you know. So you have to make sure that you check, you know, to see. I do know that there is now a research, at least with Gemini, which is what I use most of the time. There is a button where you can do deep research on things. So that's awesome. Good. Yeah, you can actually go in.
That'll be to come then, because AI is going to be introduced to K through 12, I guess, education. So I would think some of that research stuff is going to like really elevate, probably.
Right.
That's a component they'll have to add. Well, that's interesting. Yeah, I mean, because I always, and she says to me, how did you know, like, I'm explaining some things about my business, and she goes, well, how did you know to do that? And I'm like, oh, that's a good question. I don't know. Coaching, listening to people, meeting people, asking other entrepreneurs, hey, I've got this problem. Do you know anybody that can help me solve that problem? I mean, so I don't even know the answer when she asked me like that. Like, how did you know to do this?
Because I'm inquisitive.
Yeah. And then I was asking ChatGPT, because we're trying to do a raffle more digitally. And I found links that will help us do that. So change the way, I mean, this thing is amazing for kids, definitely for self-monitoring. You can ask for maybe a checklist that's more specific to after you coach with someone, then they say, okay, you need to be able to do this and this and this. Right. But I know you have a bunch of tools.
Right.
Well, don't you? You have how many tools there, Crystal?
Like over 1,000 tools, you know, and I create them all the time for different people, for specific situations with clients. I'll customize tools for sure.
Yeah. So yeah, you can get these general tools, but they may not fit your personality, your whatever.
Right. Yep. And so, yeah, we go in and we talk about it. I also like to, especially with students, I like to engage them in creating their own tools, because it helps, you know, that engagement is enough to keep them focused on what they're looking at, and they actually will learn the information and they're more likely to use the tool. And so that's another thing that I do with people.
And I was just thinking, like, I think a lot of us adults think we show a child a way to do something, right? I just heard this from a parent yesterday that's probably going to do executive functioning with us. And I'm thinking, okay, but that worked for you. But you're not maybe the same as your child in personality, right? And just because then we show it to them and they're like, why can't they get this? I don't get why they can't get this. How many times do I have to show it to them? Right? Yeah. Have you not heard that, Crystal?
All the time.
You probably know that from your own children. Yes. And I'm just thinking about that. Like, that's why you got to know a bunch of tools, because you got to try what works for one person doesn't work for another.
Right. You know, and I do see, I see patterns in what people end up using. And so I try to recommend those, you know, those types of things first, and then go from there.
For so long.
Yeah. And so I can see the, you know, the patterns and where things work and where they don't.
And I do want to say that you are skilled at personality and understanding what a personality type is, which is important.
Yes, I am to the point where I can see it without looking at anything. I can talk to a person for a few minutes, sometimes figure it out, at least what they're presenting in that moment. I can figure out what their personality types are usually. So it's very helpful in this industry because, a lot of times they don't know themselves well enough to tell me what they need. But if we can use that data, like usually people that are like you, like this, we can go that direction and try to navigate through that. And so I
That's cool.
like it for that reason. Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, because so what we learned, folks, I guess the moral of the story is, and to conclude, is what we were taught back in the day might be just like I could probably count it on my hand, right? 5 ways to organize or whatever. But there's so many other tools nowadays, and those ways that we were taught as adults may not work for your child, or it may work for one child but not the other child. They have to do it differently. So that's what we're kind of talking about, and that would help with self-monitoring,
right,
and help them be successful. Did I say that well?
Yes, you did. And you did. And so it also is, figuring out how far that individual needs to go to get somewhere, because some people, they don't do well with a very strict schedule. It actually stresses them out. And then some people, it stresses them out not to have a strict schedule. And so throwing that out, it like, oh, well, this is how you schedule. And the person's just like, this is too much for me. Like I spend all of my energy trying to keep this schedule going. And so what we do is we figure out a way to like a middle ground for somebody like that. And most of the clients that come through are like that. Where they've given up on it.
A parent about her child that sounds just like that. Yeah. Yesterday.
They've given up. They've given up on scheduling because it just, I don't know why I can't do this. Well, it might be because it's too much for you. That type of scheduling is too much for you. And so that's very important. Personality plays highly into that.
And maybe even the schedule, because we see a lot of parents that do overschedule their children.
Yes.
And some of it is the children think that they can handle it. So, because I hear plenty of things. So I think that's important for a parent to be aware of, whether their child can really handle this many things in a very busy schedule.
And teaching them self-monitor and them, figuring out what they can handle and then advocating for themselves.
Right.
Because a lot of children don't think they can even advocate for themselves. They're just like, well, this is what they said I have to do. So here we go. When it's like, okay, hold on a second. They could actually say something like, that might be too much for me. And this is why. The energy levels are different for people that have ADHD and autism specifically.
Yeah.
So
cool. Well, I thank you for your time, Crystal. I think this really actually was very helpful in a lot of ways.
That's what I want to do.
And I want everybody to know your free gift offer is the Bitly is right there, the link. You can get it. I will also put it on the actual post so it'll show up in blue. So you can just click on it and make sure to, school's ending, but this is a perfect time to go ahead and reflect while it's fresh on their mind. I used to think, oh, let's wait till July, end of July, before they go back to school to do it. But now I'm rethinking that. Now's the best time to do it. And I've already done it with the kids that I tutor myself. And it's really been quite, a breath of fresh air, I think. And the child's like, oh, it really wakes them up to, okay, this is where I need to change some things for next year. And then there's a SMART goal planner, which you can also get. So I can include that as well, because we've sent it to all our Dynamis parents already. And that's a good thing to go ahead and set the goals for next year. And you can tweak them at beginning of August if you like. But I used to wait till August as well to send that out. But I'm starting to send that out a lot earlier now. So any of these are great tools. Speaking of tools, I call them tools as well. The more you have in your toolbox, the better, parents.
Right.
So thank you again, Crystal, and everybody. I hope you have a great rest of your day and almost end of school year, right? Just a couple days left. All right. Have a great summer, but we will be back on every Wednesday at 12 noon Eastern time between now and the end of September with a topic. So look for us there. All right. Take care. Bye-bye.